Welcome to Unit 6, Lesson 3. Another in a series of confusing lessons about minor keys. So just hang with me. So the burning question is, if G major and E minor are the same, only different, how do you know which key you're in? If they both have the same key signature, if you look at the beginning of the music and they both have a F sharp, how do you know if it's the key of G major or the key of E minor? If they have the same chords, how do you know? And it's a great question. And the answer to that question is the concept of resolution, which is the point at which the progression comes to a place of rest. So I'll try and demonstrate this with some chord progressions, let you just use your ear to hear it. So if I start on A minor, you have no idea whether I'm in the E minor or G because I've given you no hint about because I'm not playing E minor or G. Sometimes the first chord will be the key, but not always. So I'm going to start on A minor. And I'm going to play some chords that are in the key of A minor and the key of G. So if I play A minor here, and I go to C, and then I go to D, and I go to G, you can hear that that's sort of a place of rest. And then when I start over, we have this unsettled sense, like it wants to move somewhere. When I play this D chord, which is the 5 chord, it resolves to G, which is the 1. That's a sense of rest of the progression. So even though so in that case, the progression isn't revealing its key until the very last chord. Now if I started on G, maybe went to A minor, went to C, then went to D, it wouldn't resolve till I got back to the beginning. So sometimes the progression resolves at the end, sometimes it resolves at the beginning, sometimes it'll start and end at the resolution point, something like this. Here's a 4-bar progression with a G at the beginning and the end. So 1, 2, 3, I'm just going to go to C, D, and it resolves at the end back to G, and then it's going to start on G again. Here we go, starting. So that 5-1, that D to G is really what tells us what key we're in. In that case, it's the key of G major. And like I say, sometimes it will be a 5 chord at the beginning and the end of the progression. It doesn't resolve till we get back to the beginning. Most of the time, the song will start on the key it's in. So if it starts on G, it's a pretty safe guess that it's in the key of G. But it may move to a place where you could argue it's in the key of E minor because the way it resolves. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I'll play some sort of ambiguous progressions and you can see what we're talking about. Okay, if I'm in the key of E minor, I'm going to start on the A minor again. If I go just like we started before, I played A minor, C. Now I'm going to play a B7 to E minor. And that's where it came to rest. A minor, C, I'm playing that B7, which is the 5 chord, 5, resolves down to 1. So that's clearly in the key of E minor, even though it started on A minor. I didn't give you that hint at the beginning. I kind of fooled you there. If I start on E minor, go to A minor, maybe go C, D, G. Oh, that's the resolution. And so I would argue that's in the key of E minor, in the key of G major, because we went C, D is the 5 to G at the end. And so then I would think this is E minor, it's a 6 that I'm starting on. In the key of C, in the key of G, I'm sorry, this would be the 2 chord. 4 is C, 5 is D, and that resolves to G. Now I'm going to play basically the same thing, only make it in E minor. So if I start in E minor, go to A minor, same chords that we did before, C, but now instead of going to D, if I go to B7 and then back to E minor, that's clearly in E minor because it resolved to E minor. Some progressions it's really hard to see, and you might argue that changes even from the key of G major to E minor. And this is actually a really common thing. Sometimes the verse of the song might be clearly in G, something like this. So I'm just going C, D, and that's a 1 in the key of G, 4, 5 primary chords, and then maybe in the bridge we'll go to E minor, it's clearly in E minor, and then at the very end to get us back to G it might go and put us back to G. So this idea of resolution is really about how the 5 chord moves to the 1 chord. And so in the key of G major, the 5 is D or D7, and they resolve to G. So when you see that those 2 chords combined, you can pretty much assume that's the key of G major. If you see a B minor, or better yet, a B7 preceding an E minor, then you could assume you're in the key of E minor. So even though they share the same chords, the way you determine if it's major or minor is really the resolution. And the same thing's going to be true of the melody. If I start on C and resolve to E, it's going to sound minor. If I resolve to G, it's going to sound major. Now, one thing that's a little different about melodic resolution is that it's usually by stepwise motion. In other words, it's usually a note right next to the note. So if I'm resolving to G, I would either resolve with an F sharp to G, I'd resolve with an A to G. If I'm resolving to E minor, I would resolve with it either in F sharp to E or a D to E. And so those are the little hints with melodic. I don't expect you to really understand this or remember it, other than to just realize that if you're wondering, the basic idea is the point of resolution, which is when the progression seems to come to rest. The other way that you can often do this is a little more holistic way, which is just minor songs tend to have a sort of sad emotion. And major songs tend to have a brighter or happier sound. And this tendency can also be used to our benefit as a songwriter to either reinforce the emotion or to create some sort of sense of incongruity or humor. All right, so like I say, you can either look for the point of resolution, the 5 to the 1 in the key of E minor, that's B7 to E minor, or B minor to E minor. And in the key of G, it's D to G, or D7 to G. Those are the resolution progressions. Or you can simply use your ear and think, does this song sound sad or happy? Because that's a pretty reliable way to do it, actually. So that would be obviously kind of a minor key. Major keys sort of have a happier sound. And they're all going to resolve appropriately. All right, well, that's it for major and minor keys and the point of resolution. So as you do go forward, I want you to notice that almost every song in this book resolves with a 5-1 progression, either in the major key or the minor key. And so I want you to sort of look for that in these songs. You can look at the songs we've learned previously. They're all that way too. And it's just a good thing to become aware of. All right, practice your chords. We'll see you at lesson 4.